Welcome. I'm Dr. Janet G. Metzger. I'm very glad to be here with you today. I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. I have a PhD from the University of Southern California, and I am currently teaching at Palm Beach Atlantic, a school in the Christian Coalition in West Palm Beach, Florida. I moved to Palm Beach Atlantic College after teaching for Lincoln Christian Seminary for 3.5 years at the Chicago Center for Urban Mission. At the Chicago Center for Urban Mission, I taught courses in urban church planting and courses in planting churches in Muslim context. My love of Muslims goes back many years to the time when I was in junior high school and my dad, who was teaching at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, brought Muslim students into our home. When I attended Lewis and Clark College, I actually lived with Muslim families in Indonesia, and I came to know Christ in large part through the ministry of a Muslim woman who was now following Christ. She had been a shaman on one of the outer islands of Indonesia and was able to minister the love of Christ to me in a way that no one else had been able to demonstrate. She spoke with authority of the power of Christ and also wrapped me in arms of love. Because of her ministry to me, I wanted to return to Indonesia as a Bible translator. I studied Bible translation with the Summer Institute of Linguistics, Wycliffe Bible Translators, for 2 years. God definitely closed the doors to Bible translation and encouraged me to continue on in the field of communication. Through my studies in communication, I have worked with Muslim men and women from all around the world. I have worked with Muslim men from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. I have worked with women from Iran and Iraq, Southeast Asia, Muslim American women from Palestine, and women in the Nation of Islam. I am currently serving on the board of directors of the South Asian Friendship Center, one of the largest outreaches to Muslims in North America. My role is that of a support person. I encourage the women and provide spiritual support and emotional support for those who are working at the grassroots level. Some of the most blessed moments of my life, some of the most blessed times of my life have been those times simply spent sitting on the mat with a Muslim woman friend, taking time to share a cup of tea, taking time simply to be together. I want to introduce you in these lectures to the world of Muslim women, a world that I so deeply love. At this time, I would like you to pull off the resources for the introduction. This would include the syllabus, a bibliography list, and internet lists. As you might well know, Muslim women are one of the largest unreached people groups in the world. Muslim men have been reached by a concerted outreach, but Muslim women still remain hidden. Yet they are a very important group. They are targeted very specifically by Muslim fundamentalists because they are the conservators of the faith and are crucial for a child's understanding and growth in Islam, especially up to the age of 10 years. Muslim women can be reached mostly and only through other women. For the most part, and it's very few exceptions, but for the most part, Christian men may not reach or cannot reach Muslim women. For a very large proportion of Muslim background believing men who become believers, men might not be able to reach Muslim women because of the rules of segregation, but also if one is coming quite quickly out of an Islamic background, a new believer might not think of his wife as being capable of understanding spiritual issues, or he might be very concerned that his wife would divorce him. A wife is able to divorce her husband very quickly in this one case when a man becomes a Christian. There is, therefore, a deep need for Christian women to reach this unreached people group. We need women who are willing to abide by the rules of modesty. We need women who are willing to learn the rules of hospitality, who are willing to enjoy the company of Muslim women, to reach out to this group of people that can be reached in no other way. We need Christian agencies to support and fully train single women to reach single women and children, wives who have been called to the mission field who can reach families, and even the wives who do not feel called to the mission field but go along so that they do not destroy the work of other women. We need mission agencies to support and encourage Christian women in this mission. We also need Christian men to disciple MBB men, the men who are Muslim background believers, in how to care for and honor and respect their wives, their mothers, their sisters, their cousins. We also need Christian men to be aware of the issues that Christian women face in ministry to Muslims. The work is very difficult for Christian women, and they need much more encouragement and support from men than men are aware of. And finally, we need men to support women in the ministry, to help free up the time that women need to do the ministry. In order to encourage women and men to reach out to Muslims, this is an introductory series of 3 lectures: an introduction to women in Islam, an introduction to ministering to Muslim women, and an introduction to issues that Christian women face in ministry. In these lectures, I will not be talking very much at all about Islam in North America. On your resource list, you will want to pay special attention to the handouts prepared by Adam Edgerly and Carl Ellis that look at some of the issues in North America. Those of you who are working on graduate studies will also want to get a copy of the book by Oxnavad and Welliver, found on your bibliography list, The Gospel for Islam, that looks specifically at ministry issues in North America, the U.S., and Canada. There is one chapter in there targeted specifically for women. It is transcripts of women discussing their ministries and discussing the issues that they face in North America. I also will not be speaking a lot about conversion issues. Graduate students will want to read the book by Anne Way, Daughters of Another Path, and you will also want to read the book by Aidney that discusses why women move from Islam to Christianity. Despite the fact that I'm not covering these major topics, this will provide a solid introduction to many of you about the issues of ministry to Muslim women. Undergraduate students should definitely look at all the charts that are with your links and do all the assignments that I discussed. Graduate students, in addition to looking at the charts, will want to read the notes that are with your links and go to the books that are on the bibliographies and to the videos. Graduate students will want to talk to your professors about additional assignments. Again, there is a deep need for people to work with Muslim women. I will now begin the first lecture, An Introduction to Women in Islam. As I want to remind you as I move into this lecture to carefully look over the resources, the syllabus and its reading list, the bibliography, the additional bibliography, the internet links for Muslim women prepared by Grace Wiebe, a woman in Canada, and the material by Adam Edgerly. These resources will be very helpful for further study. The final resource I want you to look at is the name and address of the South Asian Friendship Center. If you are interested in networking, the South Asian Friendship Center will be the group that will be able to get you in touch with women involved in this ministry. As we begin to look at an introduction to women in Islam, I want you to print out the handouts for this lesson. You will notice that there are both charts and notes. Again, undergraduate students, pay very careful attention to the notes going in order on your list, to the charts going in order on your list. Graduate students, please read the notes, and if they are available, buy or read the books that these notes are coming from. When we think about Muslim women, we often carry around with us stereotypes. Stereotypes may have a grain of truth in them, but stereotypes are not the whole picture. We as Christians need to model the integrity of Christ, who knows all about these women and who also knows all about us. We cannot box these women into narrow boxes and expect to minister to them. And we also need to understand their perspective on us. We think that we are carrying something great and precious to these women, and indeed we are. But these Muslim women also see in our culture many things that they find disturbing, and if we stop to think about it, we might find disturbing also. We need, therefore, before we begin outreach and ministry opportunities, to know the women we are working with and to know the culture that we are working with. As we go through this today, I want to look at three major topics. Again, the types of Islamic expressions that there are. The second topic is the history of women in Islam. And the third topic that I want to look at is the socio-political religious world that Muslim women live in. Again, Muslim women show all the variation in their beliefs and in the practice of their faith that Muslim men show. These beliefs in their faith are determined by denomination, somewhat the intensity of the beliefs that they hold, the forms of logic that they use, the socioeconomic status that they inhabit, their ethnicity and nationality. Muslim women, like Muslim men, belong to one of two main denominations, the Sunni or the Shia. 85% of the Muslims in the world are Sunni, about 15% then are Shia. Shia Islam is associated mainly with Iran. Sunni mostly is associated with everywhere else. There is a deep division between the Shia and the Sunni, sometimes almost irreconcilable differences. When a woman is a Muslim, she can vary not in her intensity of belief, but in her intensity of orthodoxy. A woman can be very orthodox in a traditional sense, never having been exposed in any way that she is aware of to modern issues, living a very, very traditional lifestyle, or a woman may be more fundamentally orthodox. She may be a woman who has chosen a very traditional, very severe, very strict expression of Islam. A woman might be a very conservative Islam, holding to the fundamental beliefs of the Quran and very traditional interpretations of the Quran, but in an environment where the beliefs and the practices have been softened somewhat by a Western influence or by the laws of the land that have promoted an expression of Islam that is very comfortable for women. A woman may be a very progressive or westernized Muslim, someone who is educated and trained in Western schools, who is willing to participate in many Western forms of education, and a woman who is searching, in fact, for ways to bring reconciliation between Muslims, Christians, and Jews, a woman who is seeking, in fact, to find greater opportunities of expression for the women that she sees around her. Or a Muslim woman may be a very secular, very nominal Muslim woman, Muslim in not just in name only, but adhering to the practices in a minimal way. So we have Muslim women who are very orthodox and fundamental, who might be very disturbed by the progressive ideas of a Muslim woman who is more attuned to the West. We might have a Muslim woman who is very secular, feeling very bound and hampered by a Muslim woman who is more orthodox or traditional. Muslim women also vary in the type of expression, logical expression, that they feel more comfortable with. Some Muslim women may be very, very deductive, using a logic that is extremely Quranic, very well educated, able to debate with the best of the men, able and very comfortable with the logical systems of thought and with bringing principles out of the Quran. Other Muslim women may be more comfortable with the Sufi thought, with the mystical expressions of Islam, blending and softening the rationality of the Quran with a very warm love for God. And then there are Muslim women, many in traditional societies, many of the poorest in the urban areas, or who seek out very concrete expressions of their faith through folk Islam, whose value system and whose decision-making is based very much on their intercourse with spirits, their intercourse with saints, and their relationships with sheikh or peer, the friendships they have formed, the advice and counsel they get from sheikh or peer. Muslim women also vary by socioeconomic status. We have women who are the heads of state, prime ministers, and queens. We have women who are extremely poor. There are women who are jailed for their own protection. There are women who are business women, professional women, medical doctors, professors. There are women who live in the urban areas. There are women in the rural areas. There are women who are refugees and women who are helping to develop international law. A woman's socioeconomic status helps to determine her interpretation of the Quran and how she puts her practice, her faith into practice. The ethnicity and nationality of a woman also influences how she practices her faith. A woman from Indonesia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, a woman from Pakistan or Sudan will have very different expressions of their faith. The implication of this is that for ministry is that, first of all, we need to be aware that not all Muslims are using the same text. All Muslims will be basing their lives on the Quran, but not all women will be choosing the same text as their primary text, or if they choose the same text, these women may be interpreting it very differently. Thirdly, women's use of text may be deeply influenced one way or the other by the laws of the land. For example, some women will choose not to veil because the Quran gives veiling as an injunction only to Muhammad's wives. Other women will choose to veil because even though this injunction was given only to Muhammad's wives, veiling is part of the hadith or the tradition. Some women are compelled to veil by the law of their land. For example, in Afghanistan, other women are compelled to take off the veil by the law of their land, and still other groups of women living in North America have the freedom to choose whether to wear the veil or not because of the laws of the land and the rules in their community. The implication for ministry is that we need to be very, very culture specific and reach out to one specific group of Muslim women, tailor our language, tailor our behaviors to be appropriate for that one specific group. We've looked a little bit then at the types of influence on Muslim women from their background, denomination, the intensity, the logic, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, and nationality. Let's turn now to the history of women in Islam. Women have had a very important place in the history of Islam. And women's issues were a large part of Muhammad's struggle to build the best of all communities. In pre-Islamic Arabia, children could be buried at birth. Women had no inheritance rights. On the other hand, many of the Arab societies were matrilineal and matrilocal, with kinship being traced through the woman, and with the husband moving to the wife's home, the children staying with the wife having the right to kick the husband out at any time. Muhammad was married to an older woman, Khadijah, who was from a trader clan, the Quraysh. Khadijah helped to raise Muhammad up out of poverty. She was his first supporter. She was the first person to believe that the revelations Muhammad was having were from God and were not the delusions of an insane mind. She encouraged him to go back to the cave to receive further revelation. She encouraged him to talk to others about the recitations he had been receiving. She is considered to be the first Muslim. Muhammad had a daughter, Fatima, who is considered to be a saint by Muslims. She is worshipped by Muslims in many parts of the world. After Khadijah died, Muhammad married several wives. Among them was Aisha. He married Aisha was betrothed to Aisha when she was 7 years old and was married to her when she was 10. Aisha was thought to be the favorite of his wives. He received revelations in her presence. He did not receive revelations outside of her presence. Many of the revelations he received in Medina were concerning his relationships with his wives there and how to integrate his wives into the community he was forming and how to protect them. The rule that there must be 4 witnesses before a woman can be accused of adultery came about because of the affair of slander. Aisha was on a caravan with Muhammad. She got separated from him. She was lost in the desert. Someone rescued her. That man was accused of molesting her. She denied the accusations. Muhammad received the revelation that an accusation of adultery could come in the presence of only 4 witnesses, that those who slandered a woman would indeed be punished severely. Another thing that happened in Mecca is that the Muslim women were walking freely in the streets. Men who were not Muslims, men who were not used to seeing women freely in the streets, began to harass the women. The injunction for women to be covered, to have their bosoms covered, came as a protection to these women. In the area in the Arab Peninsula at this time, as in the Greek and the Roman cities, modest women wore a veil. Prostitutes and slaves did not wear a veil. The Quranic injunction came for Muhammad's wives to be veiled after his death and as the community grew larger. The interpretation came, the hadith grew up, that all Muslim women should wear the veil. All honorable women will wear the veil. Another very important rule about the segregation of the sexes came to Muhammad on a night when he wanted to be alone with his wives. He was not left alone. His neighbors were being very boorish, and the Quranic injunction came down that women should be separated from men by a curtain or by a veil. So in this early community in Mecca, many revelations came concerning women to protect them. Muslims were not allowed to kill babies at birth. Muslim women were given an inheritance, which was a great improvement over pre-Arab days. But on the other hand, the marriage structure shifted from matrilocal and matrilineal to patrilocal and patrilineal. Aisha, this favored wife of Muhammad, was called upon to interpret many of his sayings. An isnad, or chain of interpretation, is traced back to her. The sayings, the interpretation traced back to her, is much softer than many of the interpretations that have gained favor and that are enjoined in the hadith. So women had a very important role in the formation of Islam. Muslim men will often think of Aisha as being the cause of the split between the Sunni and the Shia. She did not want Ali to have the control that he had. She threw in her lot with the others. She even went out to fight Ali on the Battle of the Camel. Her side lost. Ali became a ruler, but when he died, the side that she had backed then became became what is known today as the Sunni. In the first couple hundred years of Islam, there was a crystallization of beliefs about the veiling, about segregation. Islam became very closely structured to the Quran. As a response to this, the Sufi movement arose, which promoted asceticism in an attempt to know God on his own terms by himself. One of the first great Sufi saints is Rabia of Basra. She was the person who introduced the concept to Islam of the love of God. Her writings are beautiful. Her life is one that can be emulated by many. In the modern era, Muslim women have been very, very strong workers for other Muslim women and for the development of the modern nation state. We have women such as Kulthum, a singer in Egypt, who reintroduced some of the sacred songs and folk songs to the Egyptian world, also as a form of resistance to the British. We have, for example, Huda Shawari, who developed women's associations, a very strong Islamic women's network. Jamila Baria, who was a freedom fighter in Algeria. Laila Balakbaki, a Lebanese novelist and poet. In the modern world today, we also still have women who are the leaders of large religious associations, who can have the oversight of 1,000 or more women. And we still have women today who are very involved in the cult of saints, including the women's saints, the women in Muhammad's family, and women Sufis such as Rabia of Basra and other Sufis. Again, the implication of this for Christians working with Muslim women is that we need to be very aware of the complex and rich civilization that we are entering, of the pride that women hold in their culture, and the models of womanhood, a great spiritual leadership, great political leadership that are there in front of us. We have looked now at some of the history of Muslim women and at some of the types of Islam that Muslim women engage in or practice. Let us turn now to the socio-political, religious world that Muslim women inhabit. First of all, I want to look at socio-political issues. Secondly, I want to look at religious status from a male perspective. Thirdly, I want to look at religious status from a female perspective. When we are looking at socio-political issues, we are looking at two things: layers and levels of worldview, and then forces, sociocultural patterns or forces that influence Muslim women. Anytime we work with a Muslim woman, as when we work with a Muslim man, or as when we talk to our neighbor or a person we meet on the street, we are all influenced by many, many layers and levels of worldview. Depending on the country we live in, our socioeconomic status, the amount of education we have had, one layer or another may be more prevalent, but anytime we enter into discussion with someone, we embody the whole history of the world. The 6 major layers that we interact with then are the animistic, the layers of the great civilizations, the layers of the great religion, the layer of the Reformation, Protestant and Catholic Reformation, the layer of Enlightenment and modernity, and now today the postmodern era. Forces inside of us that indicate the animistic layer are a sense of being united with gods or spirits. We can see this very easily with a woman who practices folk Islam. She will pay a vow to a spirit. But we see this also in ourselves. Our television commercials, Coke or Pepsi or razor blades, if we drink a Coke or a Pepsi, we become godlike. We take on youth, we take on immortality, we take on status, we take on beauty. We still hold this animistic layer within us. Raphael Patai is an Islamic scholar who has brought out these animistic layers of the West in a very careful way. The layer of the great civilizations is the layer that helped us to understand the role of priest. It's the time when the continental trade routes were developed, and we began to develop an idea of deductive logic that is so powerful in Islam. This is also then the era of Aristotle and the deductive logic in the West, an idea of reasoning from principle, from first cause or principle down to a specific instance. The great religions of Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam spread throughout the world. During the era of the great religions, we have conversion, conquest, and consolidation. We have the development, the underlying development of the social structures that we see today. And many of our senses of what it is to be educated, to be elite, to be a good person, comes from this era of the great religions. This is especially true for the Muslim woman who sees the golden age at about 600, 700 AD. The Reformation, the Protestant and Catholic Reformations in Europe, even though these belong to the Christian religion, have influenced the entire world. out of this time developed global trade routes, the printing press, and the beginning of Western colonialization of the rest of the world. When we work with the Muslim women today, we are still wrestling with this issue of colonialization. It was, though, also out of this that the idea of the individual as equally important or more important than the community began to develop. The next wave was that of enlightenment and then modernity. Out of enlightenment, we get the Industrial Revolution. We get the technology that made very close contact between the nations so probable and so important. The telegraph, train, radio, film, TV, the computer. We get the propaganda system, the development of ideology in the West that Muslims respond to so negatively. During this era of enlightenment or modernity, we also have the issue of women's liberation that arose, again, with some things being very beneficial in it, with other parts of it being things that Muslim women respond to with great perplexity. Why should I want to be thrust into a public world away from my family? Or how come I need to accept a liberation that includes the unveiling of my body, the revealing of myself to men in ways that are shameful? In this postmodern era, we have we have the issues that we all wrestle with today, that of global business and microeconomics, the enemy or restlessness or feeling of being displaced, a world that is seemingly held together as much by the computer and internet, a world that is changed by biogenetics, a world of virtual reality that seems to impinge on and control and hinder the world of family that we used to know. These layers of worldview affect all of us. Then a Muslim woman in particular is affected by the patterns of Islam. There are 10 patterns: hospitality, honor, shame, the strong family and private world, the status hierarchy, the pattern of seclusion, the pattern of fear, the patterns of modernity, anomie, fundamentalism, and then for the Muslim background believer, of rejection, humiliation, and suffering. These 10 patterns are important patterns that influence the Muslim woman. The first 5 patterns: hospitality, honor, shame, the strong family and private world, status hierarchy, and seclusion, have pre-Islamic forms, are very much enjoined in the Quran, and are patterns that we dare not overthrow when we first enter a culture. Hospitality is the primary value. It is the heart and soul of a Muslim. And this pattern of hospitality upholds the values and morals of society. A Christian entering the culture must abide by these patterns, and even as a church is formed, a church would abide by these patterns, simply extending them to a larger group of people. Honor shame is also at the core of Muslim culture. A Christian dare not overturn these values. We see Christ himself operating within the value system of honor and shame. Kenneth Bailey, in Poet and Peasant and Through Peasant Eyes, explains how radical Jesus' sayings were in this context. But again, Jesus did not cast aside the honor-shame value system, but transformed it. Bill Musk, in The Soul of Islam, explains this system very well. Muslim women also have a strong family and private world. This is a very strong Islamic value. Again, a Christian would not overthrow this system to begin with, but would again extend this strong family sense of feeling, the strong feeling of belonging to family, to the fellowship of believers and to those others who are not yet in the fellowship of believers. These create problems or opportunities in developing fellowships for arranging marriages, Christian marriages. Status hierarchy is a very important value. Again, a Muslim judges by appearance. Are you of a high social class? Is a woman well-groomed? Is she beautiful? Also, again, age is very important. Are you an older woman, a mature woman who has the authority to speak? Again, we as Christians need to maintain and uphold these values. The fifth value is that of seclusion. Purdah, the seclusion within the home, veiling, the seclusion of the body out in the public realm, and the third seclusion, that of the parallel religious structure and dealings with the occult. Again, seclusion is a pre-Islamic value, one that is given greater credence in the Quran. Again, seclusion is something that we start with and must maintain. It is only and must maintain, depending on the social group that we are in. We may extend, modify patterns of seclusion, but not in such a way that destroys the moral value of the family. Fear is an attitude that women live with. There is fear of illness, fear of death, fear of shame, fear of powerlessness, and fear of rejection. Fear is not an attitude that we dare model. We need to model instead love and joy. And one of the greatest blessings of developing a fellowship of Muslim believers is to help people see the transformation in people's lives from fear to joy. The issues of modernity, anomie, and fundamentalism are issues that we do not yet have answers for. We are living in the same context. However, we may and can and must stand with Muslim women as they wrestle with these issues. McAlpine talks about ways that we can help build countercultural structures, or that we can transform the political structures to create an environment that is more honoring of women. And finally, the last pattern that deeply influences Muslim women, and this is for Muslim background believers, is rejection, humiliation, suffering, and the temptation to compromise. In this context, the best that we can do is to model the perseverance of Christ, to create strong communities of fellowship, to encourage women to know the Scripture, and to teach women to know how to know their Lord. We've looked at some of the socio-political factors influencing Muslim women, the layers of worldview, their forces. This is a very complex world then that we are entering. Let's look now at the religious status of women from a male perspective, the perspective of the Quran. In the Quran, men and women are considered equally spiritual. Both will stand before God, before Allah, on the day of judgment. However, women have less competence than men, and men have authority over women. Both men and women have an equal promise of paradise, but paradise is a place where men are treated to much greater delights than women are treated. A woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's in court. A woman has half the inheritance of her brother. Again, Muslim women will say, we have an inheritance before Western women do. That is absolutely correct. The half inheritance is because women were to be protected by their fathers, by their husbands, then by their sons. The actual working out of this today depends very much on a woman's level of education, on the country that she is living in, the laws of the land. A woman is subject to punishment by her husband. He may take up to 4 wives and up to a number of concubines, female slaves, and he may have temporary marriages. Because of this, Muslim women do have an alternate religious structure. They are not usually at the mosque, although women are. Usually they say prayers at home. Except for the very well-educated woman, there is very little exposure to the Quran, the Hadith, the Sunnah. What they understand is that which is given to them by the men. They live in a parallel alternative world of spirits, shrines, magic, the Tsar cult, especially in the Middle East, separate religious associations, and female saints. I want you to pay very close attention and go through in detail the chart on women's lives as seen in the Christian Bible and in the Quran. You will notice that women are given a very, very different perspective in the Quran than in a Bible. One of the main things is that a woman in the Quran in Islamic thought is fitna or haram. She is a disturbance to the community, someone who distracts a man from God. From a woman's perspective, she does have status. Her status is gained in 3 ways: through relationships, number 1, through skills and possessions and vocation, number 2, and through her age. Traditionally, a woman gains status through her father or her husband. One or the other would be providing status. When those men are no longer in her life, she gains status from her son or from her brothers and uncles. In the modern setting, a woman gains status from her husband's profession. A woman also has status gained through skills and possessions and vocation. In a traditional setting, the more veiled a woman is, the more status she has. So a woman who wears hijab and is in seclusion has much greater status than a woman who wears hijab but must be out in public, either a woman coming to her home like a seamstress or a water carrier who must go out to others. A teacher who must be in a public classroom, even though she might wear the veil, has less status because she is out in public all day long. A prostitute actually has status because she has much gold and much jewelry and many clothes. A woman gains status through her spiritual powers, her ability to contact the spirits, through her medical abilities, such as her abilities as a midwife, through her social skills, her ability to command women to help with a gathering, with a feast, with a festival, or to do her favors. And women today, even in urban areas, gain status through their ability to bake and cook. Thirdly, in terms of skills and possessions and vocation, a woman has status through the quality and quantity of the food she prepares, the quality and quantity of the gold that she wears, and the quality and quantity of her clothing. A woman's hospitality may honor or shame her husband. A woman's hospitality creates for her the support networks that she needs among women. Women will give great hospitality in order to secure income and honor, and through the hospitality that they give, they are able to gain the information that they need to raise up their husbands in the community and to ensure good marriages for their daughters. Thirdly, a woman gains status through her age. We can see from this that women live in an intimate world, a world of the neighborhood, friends and relatives, of pregnancies, births, and babies, and even a woman with a great deal of authority who can command many women will still be living in a parallel world to the man's. She will be living in the woman's world. It can be an intimate, close world. Nevertheless, Muslim women live in a world of fear. It's a world of male domination, of unseen religious leaders, of a God who is very ambivalent. It's a world where the mother-in-law holds a great deal of power, where men hold power, where a man may divorce you at any point, where you may lose honor at any point, whether through something you have actually done or simply by gossip that is heard of you. It's a world of divorce. It's a world of beating. And because women have so little power and control, it's a world where they turn to the occult. It's a world of spirits and demons. Because of this, there is a deep hunger in Muslim women for the gospel. The fear of shame, the fear of powerlessness, and the fear of rejection means that Muslim women are very, very open to the love and joy and peace of Christ, to the freedom that Christ brings. In the next session, we will be going through some of the ways to minister to Muslim women the love and joy and freedom of Christ in a way that is appropriate in their social structure. As we close this session today, I want you to remember that we have looked at an introduction to women in Islam. We have looked at the types of Islam and that women participate in. We have looked a bit at the history of women in Islam, and we have looked at the socio-political religious world that Muslim women inhabit. As Christians, we must have integrity. We must be aware of the strengths of the Muslim culture, of Islamic civilization, and we must be aware of the weaknesses that Muslims perceive in us. In addition, we must be aware of God's perspective, His perspective that says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. His perspective that also says in Christ there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. Your assignment for this lecture then is to go to two websites. You are to go to Answering Islam and you are to go to Answering Christianity. At these websites, Answering Islam and Answering Christianity, read what is said about women. After you read what is said about women, I want you to do three things. First, I want you to write a one-paragraph summary about the Islamic perspective. Secondly, I want you to write a one-paragraph summary of the Christian perspective. Secondly, I want you to write down two strong points that Muslims see in their system and two strong points that Christians see in their system. Thirdly, I want you to write 2 or 3 sentences. What are the possible implications of these strengths for ministry? What are the possible implications of what you have read about women on both Answering Islam and Answering Christianity for ministry? So what are the implications that you have of what you have read for ministry? What are the implications of the strengths of Islam and the strengths of Christianity for ministry? Thank you.